system that we live in is programmed to make us dislike ourselves, and if you dislike yourself, how can you do anything effectively and feel good about what you're doing? So
Ladies and gentlemen, straight to the point, straight to the streets. We down here in Northeast DC, Union Market to be exact. And today we're doing something a little bit different. So, because we have the primary elections coming up in DC, we wanted to talk to some of the candidates running for city council in DC. And today we have a very special guest. Who do we have the pleasure of speaking with?
Hi all, my name's Aparna Raj. I am a tenant organizer and a union member, and I'm running for the Ward 1 seat on the DC Council to try to make it more affordable and easier for everybody to be able to live here.
Now listen, with you starting off with affordability, I have to kick into first gear. We talked to a lot of residents, and we did an episode right in this spot about cost of living, where a lot of people shared that they love DC, but they just can't afford to live here.
Yeah.
If and when you're elected, how do you envision relieving some of that financial pressure for some of our residents in DC?
100%. This is something I see all the time as an organizer. Tenants who don't know if they can stay in their home or if they'll have to leave their neighborhoods in DC entirely. Workers who are working 2 or 3 jobs just to get by. And even thinking about myself, if I want to start a family, if I want to spend the rest of my life here and grow old here, I just don't know if that'll be possible anymore. So to make it more affordable in DC, my plan is to focus on both lowering the cost of basic necessities and raising wages and giving workers more power. So that means I'm going to stop major rent hikes in DC by expanding rent stabilization. So your landlord can only increase your rent a certain amount instead of as much as they want. And increasing the amount of affordable housing we have in DC and making sure that we can build housing of all income levels in every single neighborhood. I'm also going to push back against monopoly utility companies like Pepco and Washington Gas, which are the reason that we've been seeing energy bills go up hundreds of dollars. And I'm going to fight for free childcare for every single family, because right now childcare costs over $22,000 a year per child, which means you basically have to choose between staying at your job, raising a child, or staying in DC at all. So we're going to fight to lower those costs, and I'm going to fight to raise the minimum wage in DC and make it easier for workers to unionize so they can have more take-home pay, they can have more power on the job, and everyone can live a full life here.
Now, Aparna, in some of your organizing work, especially in Ward 1, what are some of the major issues that you've been hearing from people that you feel like you will be able to address if you're elected?
Yeah, I mean, the number one issue that I have heard from people is housing. It is really hard to find a place to live. If you are able to find a place to live, there are so many tenants who are living in really bad conditions. You know, I've seen people with rats, with heat going out in the winter, with AC going out in the summer, with mold, with water damage. And it's really hard to find a place that we can afford that has 3 bedrooms or more if you want to start a family or if you want more space. You know, in Ward 1, I've been thinking about that myself, and the only options I've really seen are $1 million or $2 million row homes, and that is just so out of reach for so many people. So housing is absolutely the number one thing that I've heard from people, and also pushing back against ICE and protecting immigrants. Because in Ward 1, we have a lot of immigrant communities, a lot of Latino immigrant communities, and especially since last August, we saw ICE disappearing neighbors off the street, pulling people from bus stops, tackling people in the middle of the street. And so I have been on the streets trying to keep an eye out for ICE, trying to make sure students can get to school safely. And as council member, I will push to end MPD collaboration with ICE, to strengthen our Sanctuary Values Act, and to make sure that immigrants have legal defense funds and support if they need groceries or other basic necessities and they're too scared to leave their homes.
I want to transition based on something you said. You mentioned like the youth. Right now, I don't want to connect the youth with the crime, but this is something when we talk with the youth and we talk to the residents, almost instantly when you think of crime, they think of the youth. And a lot of youth feel like they've been disenfranchised. They talk about not really getting their needs met and not really feeling wanted in DC and in our community. If and when elected, how do you envision yourself re-immersing and making the youth population feel a part of DC?
Yeah, it's exactly like you said, is that the youth feel like they're not being listened to because they aren't right now. You know, there was a hearing on youth issues just last week and only a few council members showed up. But in that hearing, teens were saying that what they really want are third spaces and safe public spaces where they can spend time with each other, where they can hang out with their friends, and they don't want to be criminalized. They don't want to have to interact with the police on their way home from football practice. They don't want to see ICE roaming their streets, which is completely fair. You know, it's on us as adults to do the complicated work of making sure that you feel heard, that they have those safe spaces. DC has been cutting rec center hours. They've been cutting programming for youth. And we know that juvenile crime peaks in the hours between 2 to 6 p.m. So those hours when teens are out of school, when parents are still at work. So what we need to be doing is funding universal out of school time programs. So youth have spaces to go to, they can hang out with their friends, they have development opportunities, and parents have the security of knowing that their kids are somewhere while they go to work. Yeah, I'll just say, you know, if we're going to push back against federal interference, that means pushing back and defending immigrants, that means defending queer and trans people, but it also means defending Black and brown youth from Janine Pirro and Trump attempting to criminalize them and attempting to flood our streets with more police who will harass our teens. So I think if I'm elected as council member, I will really work to bring youth more into the policy process, try to restart the Youth Advisory Council and make sure that it's actually representative of the teens who live in the ward and who live across DC, making sure that we have teens of all income levels, making sure that we have teens, including teens with disabilities, including teens who are parents or expecting, to really talk through what their needs are and make sure that they feel heard by the council and by their government.
Now, sticking with the vulnerable populations in the city, right? So we spoke with some seniors and senior advocates, and it was kind of like a really heavy and deep conversation. A lot of the seniors talked about feeling neglected, the same with the youth, and they talked about senior care, like how that has been traumatic for them. And when they voiced these concerns, they met with hostility. If and when elected, how do you plan or envision supporting these seniors and making their latter years the better years of their life here in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, we owe so much to our seniors. DC is what it is because of the people who came before us. And I owe so much of my organizing, of my personal life to the seniors in my life. And so it is absolutely vital that we do everything we can to make sure people can age in place and age with dignity here. You know, housing is a big, big piece of it, especially if you're on a fixed income, if you're not as mobile. We need to make sure our seniors have housing that have good conditions, that we're responding to issues quickly, that we're keeping costs down for folks, and then we make sure that things like elevators in buildings work so seniors can move pretty freely. We need to improve our transit and our paratransit. You know, seniors shouldn't have to walk 3 or 4 blocks that they may not be able to walk to catch the bus, or have to stand because there's no bus shelter there. We have to invest in healthcare and make sure that seniors are able to get the care that they need as they age without potentially going bankrupt. And we also need to invest in community. A lot of our seniors are separated from family. They may not have a ton of people in their lives right now, and so making sure we can invest in our community centers and our senior centers, again with programming for them, and make sure that they have a ton of people and community surrounding them will help them age and will also just make our community much more vibrant.
Now, speaking of vibrant communities, over the last 3 years, we have seen a little less vibrancy in our community. Over 175 restaurants have closed, taking away jobs and income in the city. If and when elected, how do you envision yourself supporting businesses and helping them make it actually sustainable for businesses to survive in DC?
Yeah, our small businesses are so incredibly important. So many of them are legacy businesses with so much culture and history behind them. And in Ward 1, we have so many different commercial corridors. We have Adams Morgan, we have U Street, which used to be Black Broadway, we have Georgia Avenue. We have so many incredible neighborhoods with so many restaurants where people feel like they're home and where people feel like they have a community surrounding them. And so my focus for small businesses, especially right now, we're seeing decreased revenues in a lot of small businesses because of a lack of foot traffic. Our federal workforce has been laid off and don't have as much money to spend at their favorite restaurant or their favorite bar. Immigrants are afraid to go out and go to their restaurants or their favorite small businesses and spend money. And so what we need to do is try to increase foot traffic, try to increase that revenue, and try to lower costs for small businesses so they can make it through this period. A big part of that is I want to explore commercial rent stabilization. We have a ton of great tenant protections in DC for residential tenants, but we haven't started exploring that on the commercial side of things. And rent is one of the biggest expenses that small businesses face. So whether it's making sure that there are standard leases across small businesses or trying to limit the amount that commercial landlords can raise rent from year to year, that would do a ton to reduce one of the major costs that small businesses face. Also pushing back against utility companies where, Pepco is raising rates a wild amount, not just on everyday people, but also on small businesses, and trying to bring back our streeteries for restaurants. There are some restaurants and bars in Ward 1 who said that they brought in anywhere from 20 to 30% of their revenue from their streeteries. And so if I get into office, I'm going to push to lower the cost per square foot for streeteries and make our permitting and licensing timelines more streamlined. Because I've talked to restaurant owners who in Maryland and Virginia, they've said that it might take days or weeks to get their permits approved. In DC, it can take months or years. And that is time that small businesses don't have as they're trying to operate these businesses. And that's time where they might be paying rent but not being able to bring in a profit. So we have to lower costs like rent, we have to raise revenue by bringing back our streeteries, and we just have to make it easier for small businesses to be able to operate here instead of just prioritizing larger corporations that are downtown.
Now, we know what you're going to do, but now we need to know who are you.
Yeah.
After all these years of doing grassroots work, what kind of motivates you to kind of take this leap into running for the Ward 1 City Council?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been a tenant organizer for years. I've been a union member, organized alongside workers for years. And I always thought that was what I was going to keep doing. But I have sat in too many council meetings and too many hearings where I have heard council members, repeat awful talking points about renters, or I have seen them cut wages for workers or cut emergency rental assistance, or these lifelines that people really, really depend on. And right now we are in a crisis moment where people are getting pushed out of Ward 1, where they're getting pushed out of DC, and where people are terrified because of the Trump administration. And it feels like now more than ever, we need someone who will unapologetically fight for renters, for workers, for immigrants, and for families. And I see this as the next step of organizing. If we want to improve people's lives, if we want to lower the cost of living, it's going to take that organizing on the outside with tenants and workers and everyone, and it's going to take having really strong allies on the inside who will carry that fight on through legislation and policy. Yeah.
Now, we spoke with a lot of residents, and every time we bring up politics, people kind of crazy. They hate that word.
Yeah.
A lot of them they don't have a favorable position towards politicians. In your opinion, what do you see the difference between, if any, between a politician and a public servant, and which one would you consider yourself?
I would consider myself a public servant, but I would probably also just consider myself an organizer, and I keep saying that I'm going to be an organizer in office too, because I think politician is so much, the vibes that you get from that word is it's about the individual, but a public servant or an organizer understands that it's about a much larger movement, and it's about the people and making sure that we're dedicated to improving people's lives and making sure that we're accountable to the people. I think a politician gets put in their position and maybe focuses on trying to climb the ladder or trying to improve their resume. But a public servant and an organizer knows that the reason they are there isn't just because of themselves, but it's because of where they came from, and it's because of the people who helped get them there. And so if I get elected, I want to be accountable to the people who live in Ward 1. I want to govern alongside renters and workers and immigrants. And I keep saying that, this doesn't end on June 16th. This doesn't end on November 3rd. I want all of the folks who've been mobilized and excited about this campaign to continue fighting for what we deserve at the Wilson Building and to continue to bring that energy there too. Yeah.
Speaking of June 16th, when these voters get to the polls, when Ward 1's constituents get to the polls on June 16th, why should they vote for Aparna as the first ranked choice for Ward 1 City Council?
Yeah, if you are tired of the status quo, if you are tired of feeling like your government doesn't listen to you and tired of always having to worry about whether you'll have enough money for something, this June we have an opportunity to totally remake DC government from one that has prioritized corporations and one that has prioritized billionaires to one that will fight for us, that will lower costs, that will make sure that immigrants and every member of our community feels safe here and is able to live freely here. And, as an organizer, I have a really bold vision. I have the experience of fighting alongside the people, and I've built a really strong coalition of people with over 30 community organizations who've endorsed our campaign, including 17 labor unions, and that includes seniors, firefighters, teachers, parents, grocery store workers, people from all different walks of life who are ready to fight for a better Ward 1 and a better DC. And so if you're ready to join that fight too, I hope you rank us number 1.
Join the fight, folks. Y'all heard it here first. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Aparna for coming on this platform. Straight to the point, straight to the streets. Yeah.